Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Remembering Science Fiction Television Shows of the 1960s and 1970s. My name is Roy Bjellquist, and I am so very, very happy and excited to welcome my special guest star tonight and special co-host, Mr. Nick Tate. Nick, welcome to the show tonight. How are you?
I'm great, thanks, Roy, and all you folks out there. Lovely to be remembered and lovely to be alive. I hope you're all wearing your masks. Here's mine. Yeah. You know, my wife makes these. She makes hundreds of these, gives them to the neighbors, to the people down at the supermarkets and in the local medical clinics. She's a doll, my wife, upstairs in her little sewing room, making them even now. She's made about 700. How about that, eh?
That's amazing. Yeah, it's a really critical time with everything that's going on. And Nick, thanks for taking the time out of your schedule to be, on with us. And, this is
I'm just so busy, Lucky I could squeeze you in. We're spending a lot of time at home, Roy, I guess. I guess everybody in the world, this is a very weird time. Just in case anybody's looking at this in 6 months' time from now or on another planet, this coronavirus, which we call COVID-19, is the scariest thing that's happened in my many, many years on this planet. And I think it's really important that we do totally ignore everything Donald Trump says, and that we do listen to the doctors and the scientists. This is an insidious thing, and we've got to stay safe. Wear a mask.
No, we definitely do.
Please. Yeah. I've just been out for a quick run. Well, it was a fast walk, really, if I'm being honest. And a lot of people out there still, some of them got masks on, but I steer right away from them. Woman coming towards me with a big dog, and I saw her on the footpath, and I thought, well, so I walked out in the middle of the street. But I'm luckily live in a very quiet area. Didn't get knocked down by a truck.
No,
you got to get clear of people.
Yeah, you definitely do.
Let's not talk about the virus anymore. Hey, I'm sorry. Sorry I brought it up, but I just want to place this piece of history in time. We're very privileged to be alive, those of us that still are. And please God, if you get the virus, I wish you well and that you'll come through. The younger the people are, and I guess most of the people watching this will not be young, otherwise you wouldn't know anything about Space 1999.
Yeah, Space 1999 has a special place in our hearts, and it's definitely a part of my generation, but it's also a part of the generation that it's almost like the next generation of fans, and it definitely continues to live on. I mean, it's hard to believe that it's actually celebrating its 45th anniversary as far as premiering this September, at least in the US. So it's definitely enduring, it's definitely going strong, and we're just so happy that you were a part of it and continue to be a part of it.
Yeah, buddy. I'm always reminded of how long it is because I met my wife while I was doing Space 1999, the second series. I didn't meet her in the first series. I met her between that hiatus, you remember? On the 28th of November, 1975 at 8 p.m. at night. How do I remember that? I'm just that kind of guy. Numbers mean things to me. I always remember our wedding anniversary. I remember when we met. Numbers are just kind of a thing with me. I guess what does that make me? Slightly autistic? I have no idea. But she doesn't remember our wedding anniversary. She does afterwards, but and in particular doesn't remember the thing of meeting. And I said, look, if you got knocked down by a truck, you'd remember when it happened, wouldn't you? I'm so romantic.
Well, you have to be a romantic guy. You've been together for close to 45 years, so that's awesome.
Yeah, we've been together. Well, is it 45 years? Exactly. Yeah, 45 years in November. We've been married for 43 years. We courted for a couple of years. I didn't think I was going to ever get married, but she wore me down. I love her. She's great. I'm so lucky, she's a really good woman. Can you imagine putting up with me, right? She has to be an angel.
That's wonderful. That's really wonderful.
Mm. And I'm talking about Hazel, of course.
Of
Hazel
course.
Butterfield Tate. Yes. It's been a good time. And my beautiful son, Thomas, and my daughter, Jessie, just great kids. And of course, he's 40 now, and Jess is 34, just had a 34th birthday. And we're all living here in LA now. Used to be living in England when I was doing the series. Tom was born in Roehampton, and we were doing the series at Pinewood Studios. About a 40-minute drive for me in the mornings. I'd get up at 5:30 in the morning and down the M3 to Pinewood Studios. It was so exotic, you know. All the James Bond movies were made at Pinewood Studios. Some of the biggest movies in the world were made there. It was so thrilling to be in that environment, and old world environment too, because they had, you never saw this, of course, you're watching Space 1999, you're seeing all the magnificent high-tech looking stuff that we thought it was in 1975. Well, actually, we started in 1973. Can you believe? The first footage that we ever shot on the series was in November of 1973. And it was mostly filmed, therefore, through 1974 and into March of 1975. And then the series opened in America, and we hoped it was going to be hugely successful.
You'll need to unlock your iPhone first.
See, my iPhone is talking to me. I must have said something that made it want to answer me. I wasn't talking to you.
It's technology, Nick.
It's not like the Comlocks. Yeah.
At least with the
God, I
Comlocks,
wanted
there was
that.
control.
I so wanted to have a Comlock, and now I've got one in an iPhone, you know, and it does everything for me. It even answers me when I don't know I'm talking to it.
Nick, I just want to give a quick shout out. There's a lot of people that are tuning in from all over, and they're saying hello. And I just want to name a few names. Hi, Francine. Hi, Brian Jackson. John Hogue. Denise, thanks for tuning in. Marianne, thanks for tuning in.
The picture to you is frozen. I think you said John Hudd, did you?
No, John Haig. He's
John Haig, okay.
Yeah, he's a fan. And there's a lot of other fans that are tuning in. I just want to let everybody know we are going to do a question and answer with Nick. It will be towards the latter part of our broadcast. So if you can save your questions until then, but thank you for tuning in, and we're very excited to have you on here.
Yeah. Roy will be translating the questions, probably narrowing them down. A lot of people will ask the same things, and if he's got time, he'll work out what are the essential questions.
Nick,
I just wanted to say that you said something to me when we were doing the test this morning about how you didn't see the series until 1980, was it?
No, 1975. I actually started watching it in September of 75 when it premiered.
Oh, you did? Well, you must have been 3 or something, were you?
Thanks for the compliment, Nick. Actually, I was actually 9. I was born.
Were you really? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I thought you missed the series when it first came out, and you were one of those people that got it the second time around.
No, I'm actually a first generation Space 1999 fan right from day one.
Well, you see, you're obviously older than you look. You look like you're 24.
Oh, I will take that as a compliment, Nick. Thank you.
Butter. I've known Roy for a long time. You know, I don't go to many conventions, but because I didn't go for the first 20 years to more than about 3. And then I kind of missed the whole kind of thing, and particularly the love of the fans. It's very heartwarming, I got to tell you. You know, I can spend most of my life walking around the streets of LA, totally unknown. Some people give me strange looks like, who was that? I know that. Are you my neighbor? You know, that kind of thing, you know. Or somebody, particularly technical people. If I walk into a voiceover studio, it's nearly always the guy, because I do a lot of voiceovers, it's nearly always the guy behind the console who's working the board, who'll look at me and say, I used to watch Space 1999. See, they all remember because they're techies. And I think if you've got that kind of mentality, very techie mentality, you love the concept of what Space 1999 was about, because it was almost, at least it was planned to be, science fiction rather than science fiction. And that's why a lot of Star Trek fans seem to be disappointed in the beginning, because they wanted all the crazy science fiction stuff. But they wanted to base it very much on fact, and as we knew it. But of course, you know, if that was truly the case, then the Earth would have been, the moon, having broken away from the Earth, would have been going so slowly that we never would have been able to get to any of the planets that had any possibility of life forms on them, because they're hundreds of light years away. And I guess, you know, you can go through warps and black holes, but would you survive? Who knows? I wasn't a science fiction fan when I started Space 1999, I got to tell you. I'd read Asimov and a couple of others, very, very famous guys, but they were science writers. They weren't science fiction writers. And that inspired me, you know. I never liked it when Freddie Freiberger came into this. I never liked Freddie Freiberger, let's be honest. But I never liked when he came into the second series and he wanted to put in all those, what I consider to be pantomime monsters with crazy hats on and funny looking eyes. And it seemed to me to be going into pantomime. I loved the first series more. There was a lot of great stuff that happened in the second series, of course. Freddie wasn't all bad. He knew what he was doing. But we'll talk about that more as we go on today.
Oh, definitely. We'll definitely, go to that. Michelle says hi, and she's saying Ray Bradbury. She was wondering if that was who you're thinking of. And then also Mike Rizzo is saying about Arthur C. Clarke, another
Arthur C. Clarke. Arthur C. Clarke was one of the great ones for me. Yeah, I loved him because a great scientist. Yes, thank you. You said Ray. What was that? Byrne?
Ray Bradbury. Yeah, that was the other one. Nick,
oh well, Gene Roddenberry, of course, was doing Star Trek. I nearly did. Well, we'll talk about that too. I did do 2 Star Treks, as you know, and I nearly did Star Wars. That's another story we can talk about. So I hope you can remember to prod my memory, because I tend to digress. I'm talking about something and suddenly I'll time warp. I'm the one that time warps. And you got to steer me back, buddy.
Oh, it's okay, Nick. Actually, the one question I want to ask you, as far as what did you do exactly right before Space 1999, and how you became involved in Space 1999?
Well, that's kind of like a long and complicated answer to that, but I am Australian, as most people know. I've lived basically 25 years in Australia, 25 years in England, and 25 years in America. That makes me sound, and so it's been divided almost equally into 3 parts of my life. I was a young actor in Australia. Both my parents were very well-known actors in Australia. So I grew up, and I'm writing a memoir, actually. It kind of would have been a bit like being Nicole Kidman and Tom Cruise. Remember when they got married, and those kids from that marriage. My life was very like that. My mother was hugely popular in Australia. She was very famous, and my father was quite famous, but she was by far and away the dominant one at the time. She was older than my father by quite a measure, but she loved him. He was a very funny guy, great character actor. And he came more into his strengths as an actor as he got to be in his 50s and 60s. But they were living and working in Australia, and there was no film happening in Australia because although they'd made movies up until the Second World War, after the Second World War hit, we were very depleted, and particularly of our youth, our young men. We sent a lot of Australian manhood, essential manhood, overseas to the war, and they never came back. It was very devastating for a lot of the Commonwealth countries who tried to support the Mother England, you know. I lost uncles and God knows how many potential friends and so forth. So many people lost so many people. It's this kind of virus thing is rather like a war in that, you know, we are sometimes saying goodbye to people who we may really be saying goodbye to, you know, and I wave goodbye to them, bye. And I'm thinking, I wonder if they're going to die or I'm going to die. I mean, I can laugh about it really because it is the weirdest situation to be in. But anyway, my folks were well-known actors in Australia. And I grew up as a child. I was typical, well, I don't know about a typical child of actors, but I guess I was. I was a show-off. I entertained everybody. I was a natural comic. And people talk about how they got bullied at school. I was never bullied at school for two reasons. One was I was always funny. I know that Robin Williams talked about that. He said the way to stop getting bullied by anybody is to make them laugh, and then you become their favorite person. Well, it wasn't that I was scared that I did that. I was just a natural comic. And I don't know if you know that, because in Space 1999, I wasn't particularly funny, although I know I made some people laugh. So I was, and the other thing about the two reasons, I was funny. And so the bullies tended to kind of not quite be able to get me. Secondly, well, and that's part of being funny, I was very cheeky, and I was very fast, so I was hard to catch. And I was kind of like I could take a few blows as well. I got into lots of fights, but I was never essentially bullied. And I hate bullies, and I used at school to seek out the kids that were being bullied and tell them, if anybody comes near you, you come to me. And that was kind of like the Alan Carter character. You know, I essentially knew that when I finally got the role of Alan Carter, that's the sort of person he was. Now, it's interesting because I'd been an actor in Australia, and I'd done very well. A young actor starting to get television series and stuff. Television was very new in Australia. Didn't start there until the end of the 50s. And so throughout the 60s, I was this young actor coming up, and I was at school, and I was doing radio shows in my school uniform and going off and playing the singing telegram boy and Clifford Odets, The End of the Civilization. It's that crazy play called. I'll think of it in a minute. But it's about the end of the world. And I played a singing telegram boy because I had a very good singing voice. And I was picked up, so much so that I got picked up by the Sydney Opera Company. And I was singing Amal and the Night Visitors in Minotti's Christmas opera. I was only about 15 or 16. And then my voice started to break. So I couldn't sing anymore because I was in a high soprano. Couldn't sing anymore. And I hated school, and I wasn't good at school. So you guys out there that have been to school and you've been struggling and you think it's tough, don't worry about it, because school's really got very little to do with who you are when you get out of school. I mean, I think it's different if you have the propensity to be classically trained or scientifically trained, to be academic, then go for it, because it's very hard to get a good paying job these days without those kind of qualifications. My son is a natural tech. He just can work computers from the first minute he ever touched one. He's got that strange kind of quality where he's two things. He's very artistic as well. So he studied drama at school, as I did. And he was in all the musicals and plays, and then tested for universities in that capacity. He was accepted into 7 universities, all their drama departments. And I wanted him to go to New York, NYU, into Tisch, because he was accepted, and we went there. But my wife hated the campus because there's no campus. You know, you walk around the streets, you come out of, and they say, oh, that's where those classes are. And the kids come out of that class into the streets of New York. Somebody walks up saying, hey, you want to buy some drugs? My wife said, no, that's not going to happen. Oh, boy, you know, he's not going there. So she wouldn't let Tom go there. We'd just been, before we got to New York, we went to Boston, the Boston University, where again he was accepted. And you do these trips where you walk around doing all that. And one of the guys that was showing us around, very clever at walking backwards all the way through the campus, telling us what was going on, you know. He was one of their top actors. And he said that I said, why did you choose Boston and not New York? Because he said he was offered both. And he said, because I love the Boston campus. And he said, every weekend I go and spend in New York because it's close. And I said, but wouldn't you be better off in New York all the time instead of having all this travel? He said, yeah, but I got a better offer in Boston, so that's what I did. So my wife said neither way. She didn't want Tom in either of those places. We went to Michigan, and as you probably know, Michigan is a fabulous campus. And Tom was also very good at football and very fast and strong. And he was the kicker he played a lot of soccer. And so therefore the gridiron team asked him to be their kicker for the high school. And Tom won the Western region here. He went 36 and 36 in kicks, which is apparently very good if you understand what that means. And Michigan were very happy to have him, but he actually got into the drama department. So he said to me, Dad, I'm going to go and test and be redcoated. And I said, no, you're not, Tom. You've been they gave him a fantastic scholarship, almost a free ride. And they developed a new position at Michigan for him. So he said, but I want to go and I said, no, you got to, for this first year at the very least, you must stay and honor your scholarship. So he did. And at the end of the year, they did One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And of course, all the top guys were up for the lead role. Tom, who was a freshman, got the lead role. And he played the lead in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And I'd always seen everything that he'd done before because I was very proud of him as an actor. And I would go and help with rehearsals. And but I couldn't because he was in Michigan. So we flew there for the opening night. And it was an extraordinary experience to see my son playing that role because he played him like Jesus Christ. You know, it was this, he'd never seen Jack Nicholson's performance. It was brilliant. But Tom was just so incredibly empowered by the evangelism of that character. And the dean of Michigan University wrote a fan letter to Tom, said, I've never written a fan letter to a student before. He said, but I have to tell you, your performance was beyond anything that we've ever seen at this school. You're in the wrong school. You should be in NYU. Now, this is the Michigan dean of the university telling him he's in the wrong school. So Tom said, Dad, you know, you wanted me to go to New York? I'm going to go there. I said, you got to go back and audition all over again. He said, I don't care, I will. He did. And of course, they grabbed him. He came out of NYU with honors in drama, and we should have been seeing Tom in films and television today. But when he came out, it was a period in time that I was very proud of for him. But we were back living in Australia by then because of 9/11. So there's been many crises that have happened to America in the time that I've lived here. There was the kids shooting each other in Columbine, and my wife's going, I'm not living in the country anymore. She wanted to take our daughter home. And when 9/11 happened, that was it. We were on a plane back to Australia. My son, however, remained in New York, and he finished university there. Then he came into LA, and I don't know if anybody here is old enough or young enough in the industry to know what was going on in the early 20s here. After 9/11, there was a writer's strike, there was a commercial strike, and a director's strike. And then I think an actor's strike as well. And my son was trying to earn a living as an actor in the midst of all that. And people used to say to me, he looks just like you. He should be our next Alan Carter. And I thought if there was ever going to be, people were always talking about, let's do Space 1999 again, that's what Tom could do. Because he did look and does look very much like me. Anyway, you can't spend all that time in an industry that's going on strike. And he started working for Hulu and because of all his technical abilities. And he went through Hulu for 10 years and decided he's not going to be an actor anymore. So we won't be seeing Space 1999 with a Nick Tate lookalike in it. Even if somebody does do Space 1999, and I wish they would, because it's a great idea. But of course, we're way beyond Space 1999. There are people now that wanted to do a 2099. And perhaps it will happen. I don't know. I could play.
There was a lot of talk of us.
I'm sorry. I was going to say I could play Professor Bergman.
Absolutely.
Yes, I could do all that kind of crazy stuff.
There is only one Alan Carter, though, Nick.
Yeah. What were you saying?
In regards to 1999, though, do you have as far as like special memories on the set and, you know, different actors, I mean, you had a fellow Australian that actually worked on Space 1999, Leo McKern in The Infernal Machine.
Yeah.
I mean, that must have been.
Well, the extraordinary thing about Leo McKern is my father's best friend. They were great mates. My dad, he didn't do a Space 1999. He was very ill. In fact, he died in 79. So not long thereafter, he had Alzheimer's. You know, I'm way older than my father was, and I'm fit. I play golf and I love life. But, you know, he, as I think I told you earlier on, was an actor. And in that era, back in the 60s and 70s, even before that, after the war, a lot of show business people drank very heavily. My father drank and smoked. I was going to say drank like fish and smoked like a chimney. And he eventually left Australia and went to England to work. He'd been in a couple of Australian films and started doing quite well. And he took himself and divorced mum and me and went to England. He asked me to come to England a little bit later on. And it's one of the reasons I got into Space 1999. Now, you did ask me earlier, and as we know, I have a tendency to go off the beaten path. You asked me how I got Alan Carter in Space 1999. My dad had been one of the voices in the Thunderbirds for the Andersons. He didn't play any of the main characters, but there were a couple of Australian actors like Ray Barrett, who was one of the main character voices in Thunderbirds. And he also, with Leo McKern, Ray Barrett, Leo McKern, and my dad were great friends. And they all had boats, and they used to go out into the ocean and stuff. And it's particular, and that was in Australia. So when all three of them came to work in England, they would often go down and sail in the Mediterranean together. Ray had a boat. My dad, he had little boats, didn't have big boats. Leo had a big boat, and they would travel around a lot. Ray wound up buying half of an island called Formentera. He bought a great property on there. Oh
my goodness.
Yeah, Formentera, wonderful place. Very primitive and barren. But anyway, I had been doing theatre and television in Australia, and I'd been in a couple of pilots for television series that I was telling you earlier on about how it was very expensive back in the 60s and 70s to make television in Australia with a country that hadn't made a lot of television. And I got involved in two pilots not long after I'd made that television series, which we called Dynasty in Australia. It was about the Packer family, and the Packer family were a newspaper and television moguls, very much like Rupert Murdoch is. They, in fact, were opposing newspapers in Australia. Murdoch ran the South Australian end of newspapers and television and magazines, and Packer ran the eastern part of the country. And they were very political. And it was a great series about the dynastical qualities of that family, with Frank Packer being the mogul at the top, and then his sons running the television and the newspapers, and all the political chicanery that went on. It's a great idea, very different from the American dynasty. And when I finished that series, I came to England. And as I said, I made a couple of pilots for shows, one of which was called The Chaser. It was a series about a detective who lived in the seedy part of Sydney. And he was always going out, and he was kind of like Columbo in a sense that, although he was young and good looking, naturally, I was playing him, he always, you know, he'd race to get in his car and go off and chase somebody and find he had a flat tire, or or his wheels had been clamped by the police because he'd parked illegally. And there was always things happening. Although it was a drama, it was quite comedic as well. It was a great idea for a series. One of his lines was, people talk about fighting, and he said, "Yeah, I won my last fight by 100 yards." So he reckoned, like I told you about myself as a young fella, you know, if they can't catch you, they can't beat you, you know. So I'd made that series. Oh, I didn't make the series. I made the pilot for the series, and then I came to England to work with my father. He convinced me that I should come to England and work. And there was a series that was building in England at the time. Nobody knew about it. It was American concept about a science fiction series. Obviously, this was Space 1999, but I didn't know what it was. And I'd come to England to continue because I'd been there previously, years earlier, and I'd worked and I'd had some success. I went back to Australia with a musical called Canterbury Tales, and I traveled all over Australia doing this musical because I could still sing a bit. And I loved that, most exciting period of my life. And when it finished, I was offered the Dynasty series. My father was brought out from England to play in it with me. And I did that for 2 years in Australia. And then pilots for series, which didn't go because they were too expensive by Australian standards. Because they could buy American shows, as I had already told you earlier today when we were talking. We were making shows for $30,000 and $40,000 an episode, and they looked like it. And we were up against shows like 77 Sunset Strip, Peter Diamond, all the big, wonderful American television series that were being made for $150,000 US, or in some instances, even up to $250,000. And then they were shown all over the States for many years and then sold off as cheap shows to Australia, but they were still wonderful quality. And so the Australian television industry struggled desperately to try and get a foothold because we were competing with very expensive shows with lots of wonderful star actors in them. It was to Australia's credit that it finally did break through and start making series like Homicide and Dynasty, or not Dynasty, yes, that came later, Division 4, and I was in all these things. And when I came to England, I bumped into an Australian producer called John McCallum, and he'd made a television series in Australia that was called Skippy. And I don't know if any of you are old enough to remember Skippy. It was a show that in a sense was rather like Lassie or Flipper, because there was a family that had a kid who loved the pet. And the pet was a dog, Lassie, or the pet was a dolphin, Flipper. And in the series in Australia, it was a kangaroo called Skippy. And the father was a helicopter pilot, and he was a ranger that looked after the land and all the sanctuary animals. And Skippy was a very popular series and was played all over the world. And John McCallum was that producer. He then went on to make another television series later on called Boney, which was about an Aboriginal detective who was very like Sherlock Holmes. He was smart and always got his man. And he used a lot of native cunning because he could track people like a black tracker. They call black trackers in Australia when the Aboriginal people went out and they could track people across deserts and so forth just by detecting tiny little movements in the sand, incredible. And of course, American Indian people have exactly the same, the indigenous native people, the same quality to be able to track people. So they did this television series called Boney. And in one episode, I played a policeman, obviously a white policeman, who became his partner briefly for a while. And we had a fantastic chemistry. I loved working on the show. They took me to Alice Springs, which was the heart of Australia. And it was a period in my life when I was questioning why I was being an actor and even if I wanted to do it. And I had done a stage play in Sydney. There was a smash hit. And I'd done the 2 pilots that I told you about, The Chaser and another one called The Racing Game. The Chaser was made by John McCallum. The Racing Game was made by a company down in Melbourne. And they didn't go on with them. They didn't fly. So I was finding great disappointment that even though Australia had a lot of acting and theatrical and directorial talent, they just weren't being given the break because there were so many great shows coming over from America. So they started a campaign in Australia called the TV Make It Australian campaign to try and start an Australian Indigenous industry. And those pilots were part of that. And when they didn't fly, and my father was saying to me, you should come to England and you can work here because I know you'll get work with all the experience you're gaining in Australia. That's when I flew to England. And I bumped into John McCallum, as I told you. He was the man that had made Skippy and Boney, and he'd offered me a continuation of Boney. He said, "We like your character so much, we want you to play the police officer that goes everywhere with him." Kind of like Watson to Sherlock Holmes. Yeah.
Okay.
How did you do that? You know, scratch. I thought, no, I don't want to play an idiot. You know, I don't want to play the second string. I've had great opportunities with the chaser and the racing game, but they didn't go on. So no, I'll go to England and try and brush up my career. So as I said, I arrived in England and I was in a bank in Piccadilly. And lo and behold, John McCallum, the producer of Boney, stepped out of the bank door as I was walking in. And he was about 6'7". He said,
Wow.
"My dear boy, Nicholas, what are you doing here?" And I said, "I've come to work, John." He said, "But you didn't stay and do the second series for me in Australia." I said, "No, I did a stage play called Don's Party, which I know is coming. I've skipped that part of the story, but I did this very successful play and they were bringing it to England and they asked me to come to England and do it for Robert Morley, who was a very famous English actor. He wanted me to do it. And so that's the reason I came to England. And then it got put off because they had other things they were doing. So suddenly I'd come to England and what was I going to do? So I was meeting people, taking meetings. And there was John McCallum saying to me, "Well, you could come back and do Boney for us, second series." I said, "No, John, I've come to England. I want to work here. This is what I'm going to do." So he said, "I'm having lunch with Bruce Gingell. Do you know him?" I said, "Yes, Bruce Gingell was the producer of The Chaser that I did after Boney." And he said, "Oh, what happened to that?" I said, "Well, it was great, but they didn't do it. So that's one of the reasons why I've come away." He said, "So Bruce knows you?" I said, "Yeah, he knows me very well." He said, "I'll drop your name to him." So I said, "Yeah, okay." I said, "What's he doing?" He said, "He's become Lou Grade's right-hand man."
Oh, okay.
Now, Lou Grade was, of course, Lord Grade. He wasn't Lord Grade then, who came to make Space 1999. So I went home. My phone rang about 3:00 in the afternoon, and a woman said to me, "Is that Nick Tate?" And I said, "Yes." She said, "Just a second, I got Mr. Gingell for you." Now, Mr. Gingell was like second in charge to Jesus Christ, as far as I was concerned. You know, he was somebody that, although he produced the show, I never met him. He was one of the echelon, you know, the high and mighties that you don't talk to. And he comes on the phone, typically Australian. "Is that Nick Tate?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Bruce Gingell, Nick." And I went, "Hello, Mr. Gingell." No bullshit. Don't call me Mr. Gingell. It's Bruce." He said, "Mate, you're a legend." I said, I'm a legend?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "Oh, that racing game that you did down there in Melbourne, that was great. And then the chaser that you tried to do for us, you're great, Nick. You should be working. Are you working?" And I said, No, I've just arrived in England." He said, "Oh, well, mate." He said, I'm now running Lou Grade's company." He said, "I'm going to get you working." And I couldn't believe it. I think, what? This is Christmas. You know, this doesn't happen when somebody as powerful as Bruce Gingell says, "I'm going to get you working." So he sent notes out to people in England that they should meet me. I went and I met the people up in Manchester who were shooting a television series called Crossroads about English soccer. I couldn't play soccer to save my life, but I was very physical and active, and I played a lot of rugby. So they said, "Can you play soccer?" I said, yes, of course I do. So they sent me up to Manchester and I met those people. They loved me. He'd obviously given them the brief that he wanted them to give me the job. So they asked me, would I sit down and meet all the writers? I did. And they asked me all sorts of questions about Australia. So they wanted to make the character Australian. Fine, you know, we've had some very good Australian soccer players in England. So that was all set up. And then I came back to London. I had to wait about 6 weeks before those series would start, my episodes. And then Bruce rang and said he wanted me to go out and meet Sylvia Anderson at Pinewood Studios for this Space 1999 thing. I said, "Well, what is that?" He said, "Oh, it's something about the moon, mate. You know, it's like Star Trek." I went, "Oh, okay, fine." I said, "Well, what about Crossroads?" He said, "Don't worry about that." He said, "We'll have you meet lots of people and see which one we want to do." So, incidentally, I'd also gone to Nottingham Theatre Company. They were about to do Streetcar Named Desire, which is a fantastic Tennessee Williams play. And of course, it's what made Marlon Brando famous, playing Stanley Kowalski. Stella! I went and auditioned for them, and I got the part. So when Bruce Gingell was saying to me, "You're going to go to Crossroads," I said, "Well, actually, I might be going to Nottingham to do Stanley Kowalski in Streetcar Names." "Oh, that's a bloody great play, mate. But it's theatre, provincial theatre in Nottingham. You don't want to do that. You've got to go to Crossroads or maybe Space 1999. When are you going to do it?" I said, "Well, I'm supposed to give an answer next week." He said, "Anyway, go meet Sylvia tomorrow." So I went out to this Pinewood Studios to meet Sylvia, and they were doing tests. They'd already set it all up. The whole show was cast. Everybody was in their uniforms, the sets. I walked on a Moonbase Alpha, and I was told I had to meet Michael Barnes first. He was the casting director. So I wanted to meet Sylvia because I knew that Sylvia had been Lady Penelope in Thunderbirds, and my dad had done all the character voices in Thunderbirds. So she would know him. And he said to me, "Say hello to Sylvia." So I meet Michael Barnes, casting director, brings me in, and he says to me, "Well, it's very nice to meet you, but I'm sorry, it's all cast, so nothing we can do." And I said, "Well, could I talk with Sylvia?" "Oh, no, she's very busy. You can't see her." And I said, "No, Bruce Gingell said that I should meet with her." "What? Why would Bruce do that?" I said, "Because Bruce knows my work, and I would like to meet Sylvia." "Well, I'm sorry, she's busy." So, okay. So he was clearly somebody that didn't want me in the show. But he did say it's all cast, so you can't do it. Now, I've neglected to tell you that I actually did an episode of Crown Court, which was a television series in England. There was a daily that came on once a week, and it was a court case. And you would do the show to an audience. Or you'd actually done a lot of the show, but you did part of the end of the show to an audience. And the audience voted on whether you were guilty or not, because it was a courtroom sequence. And I played a Australian heart transplant surgeon who had killed his client. And they were saying it was neglect. And the producers told me when I got the role, of course, he's neglectful. I said, "No, he's not. He's innocent." And they said, "Nick, what do you mean he's innocent?" And I said, "Well, you told me the audience would decide, right? If I was the doctor doing it, I would be doing my best. And if the guy died, that had nothing to do with my best interests. Please don't tell me he's guilty. He's not guilty. He's innocent. If I'm going to play him, he's innocent, all right? Oh, if that's the way you want your show, go for it, Well, I did, and the audience found me innocent, which was the producers couldn't believe it, So it was great. So that episode happened to be showing on television the day I went to meet Sylvia. Now, this is quite extraordinary how these things happen.
Timing.
I've met Michael Barnes. He said, "You can't go in there." And I walked past Sylvia's door. It said Sylvia Anderson. And the door's open a crack and I can see her. I said, "Is that Sylvia?" And he went, yes, come on. And I went, "Hang on a minute." He went, "No, what are you doing?" And I went, "Knock, knock, knock." "Sylvia?" She went, "Yes." I said, "Nick Tate, John Tate's son." She said, "Johnny Tate, come in. Come in." And Michael Barnes is going, "Oh, what are you doing?" And I said, "Well, my dad's a friend of Sylvia's thing." And I closed the door on it. I go in. Sylvia said, "Oh, I love your dad." She said, "Would you like a scotch?" And I said, "Yeah, I don't mind. I love scotch." So I sat and I had half an hour with Sylvia. Here's this man telling me that I couldn't meet her, And I told her what I've been doing, etc. She said, "Oh, you've got to meet Jerry Anderson." So she knocks on his door next door and takes me in to meet Jerry. And he was like, "Oh, hello, I don't really like actors." I said, "Oh, great to know, And so Sylvia says, "I'm coming out again." And I go out and I sit with her, and she loved actors and she loved my dad. I was so lucky. She said, "Oh, we've got to get something for you in this." She rings Michael and he says, "Oh, cast." He said, "Oh, it is, isn't it? Oh, God." "Well, what about the pilots that move the nuclear waste? They've got a couple of lines." He said, "Well, yes, so they've got a couple of lines, but then and they die." "Yeah, they die. Would you like to play a pilot in the opening episode? Unfortunately, you'll die, but at least we get to work together." And I went, "Yeah, I would like that. Thank you very much." So I go out and I'm given a tour of the set, and I see Martin Landau and Barbara and all these people. They're all rehearsing with Lee Katzin, the director. And I have to make a decision, you know. But if I'm going to be in the show, it's going to be 2 weeks work, or maybe even a couple of days, and then I'm dead. So I go away, but I keep on thinking about, it was like this huge high-tech thing with L&M stage at Pinewood Studios. James Bond was being made over there. Rollerball was being made over there. All these wonderful history of this place, and staggering. And I was like a pig in heaven, you know. I just loved it. And then I'm thinking about Crossroads and Stanley Kowalski, and I come back, and my agent was a woman called Marina Martin, and she's saying to me, "Oh, darling, you've got to go and do the theater. You must do theater, because that's what we do here in England, you know. Don't worry about that silly American show. That you're going to die in the first episode, so forget it. Crossroads, I don't know, a bit of a toss-up. That could work for you, but it's very commercial. I think you should do the theater, because that show might be brought into the West End. And if you're playing the Marlon Brando part, think how wonderful it will be for you." And I just couldn't get Space 1999 out of my brain. And the fact that if I did it, I'd die anyway, you know. So I did the weirdest thing, man. I decided, I don't know it was whether a dream or what it was, I wanted to be in Space 1999. And I thought, I'll show them that I'm good enough to stay in the show.
You know what, Nick? 45 years later, all the fans are going, yes.
Well, it was extraordinary, because I came onto the show and they weren't going to take any notice of me, because my character didn't do anything really. But the director, a man called Lee Katzin, he was workshopping everybody, because a lot of these actors were theater actors and or English television. They didn't really know how American television worked, particularly. So he wanted to have, usually hour-long television is shot in 8 to 9 days. That's over a period of less than 2 weeks. And then you go on to the next one, on to the next one. Kojak was being made every hour, and they used that as their kind of principle. They were doing an hour every 8 days. So they would work for 5 days in the first week, 3 days in the next week, segue after Wednesday into this next series, and on it would go. And they tried to keep that record going like that, sometimes 8 to 9 days. Space 1999, the first episode took 6 weeks to shoot. And that was a big problem, but it's the reason I'm in the show. Because during the 6 weeks that Lee did all the workshopping and the trials and changes of costumes and people and doing stunts and seeing how it all worked and doing mock scenes, he noticed me. He gave me things to do. And he said to me one day, he said, "Nick, can I talk with you?" And I said, "Yeah, you know, again, you know, talking to Jesus Christ." "Yes, Mr. Katzin." No, he said, "Lee, call me Lee." He said, "You seem to have a lot of savvy around the camera. Have you done a lot of film work?" I said, "Yeah, I did in Australia, mostly television film and television." "Yeah," he said, "you know, a lot of these English actors are a little stilted, and you're just so easy. I guess that's your Aussie quality. Do you have any footage that I could look at?" And I said, "Well," he said, "could you bring some stuff tomorrow and we'll do lunch?" I'm going to have lunch with the director? Okay, yeah, fine. So the next day I came in, I had a book that had lots of photographs of me and Boney, me and Dynasty, as you call it, Dynasty, all the shows I'd done, and a magazine which was called TV Week, Front Page TV Week, my father and I, front cover, playing father and son in Dynasty. And he's flipping through my book, and he sees this. He says, "What is this?" I said, "That's my father." "This is your dad? He's an actor?" I said, "Yeah, he was one of the voices in Thunderbirds." And he knew Thunderbirds. He said, "Oh my God, you're from a dynasty. You're from a dynasty." And I said, "Yeah, my grandmother was an opera singer, actually. Yeah." And I didn't have a son then, but I thought he was going to be an actor. Anyway, he said, "Oh." Then I had a little bit of footage of Dynasty, which was an old, what they call Kinney sound. Wasn't even Super 8. It was this thing they used to use before video came in. It was called Kinney. I don't quite know what it is, but it's some kind of impoverished film. I know that. And he looked at that, went home, looked at that. I looked at my stuff, and he came back the next day, and he said, something's happened. He said, the Italian actor that's coming to do the show, and there's a problem with him. He's not coming. He said, I want you to play this part. It didn't happen quite like that, but that's what he told me later. They actually, unbeknownst to me, the Italian actor was not coming to play Alphonse Catani. They were going to have to cast it in England, but they still wanted it to be Italian. So they were looking for dark-haired guys, rather like Tony Anholt played Tony Vidici later on. You know, that's the sort of character they wanted. But this was the first series. And as I said, it was going to be Alphonse Catani. So they were auditioning all these Italian actors. I saw them coming in down the corridor, stretching down the corridor, going into Michael Barnes's office, because he was going to cast somebody for this role. Unbeknownst to him, Lee Katzin had already spotted me on the show, and he was opting for me. Again, Michael Barnes was going to be foited, and he really just couldn't stand the fact that I got this part. It was amazing.
It's amazing how Lee Katzin went to bat for you, though. I mean,
well, what happened was
alignment.
Lee insisted that I be brought in for the auditions, although Michael did not invite me to audition. Everybody else was auditioning, and Lee came to me and said, has anybody asked you to go and audition yet, Nick? And I said, no. He said, well, I want you to audition, so I'll go and tell Michael Barnes, and then just be ready for it. Here's the sides. And he gave me the sides. I look at the sides. And I've got to do all this dialogue in Italian accent. I'd never played an Italian in my life. I think I've told this story at many conventions, so most of you know it. But, you know, I was taken into Sylvia and Jerry, and the third man, what was his name? It was Group 3 Productions. And we never saw him, but he was there for this audition. I remember it. Is his name Ray or Ron? It was Sylvia and Jerry and this other man, Group 3 Productions anyway, and Lee Katzin. And so they said, okay, do the dialogue, you know. And I'm, you know, I do my Italian accent, and I'm speaking, we've got to get, Commander, we have to do the eagle, fly the eagles off the base. And she said, Nick, he's not an Italian greengrocer. And I said, well, they're the only Italians I've ever met, you know. She said, he can't do the Italian accent, forget it. So I'm walking out the door, and Lee walks over and says, hey, wait a minute, wait, this is an international moon base. Doesn't have to be Italian. He looks German. You do German? I went, yeah. He does German, do German. So, you know, I start, hang on a second, look at it. So then I start doing, you know, I'm speaking like, we will ask the question. You know, I'm being this kind of German character, which was terrible, you know. No, this is not going to work, you know. So she says, no, get out of here. You look, we love you, Father. You're wonderful. And, you know, you've still got your part you've got, but goodbye, Nick. So I'm walking out the door, and Lee comes to me and he says, do you have any other characters? And he said, why don't we let him play an Australian? And she goes, what? There aren't any Australians on the moon. And I said, well, there aren't any bloody English on the moon either. and he goes, he's got a point. There's no, because she was saying Australians sound too much like Cockneys. And that's always been a bugbear for Australian actors. Back in the 50s and 60s, Australian actors never got to do any English films with Australians in them. They always used an English actor who had a very strong Cockney accent playing Australians. There was a film called The Overlanders, starred Robert Mitchum. He was an American playing an Australian, Irish Australian. Deborah Kerr playing an Australian. Deborah Kerr was English, but she lived in America most of her life. She didn't do a bad job with it. And then I'm just trying to, was it Terry Thomas? I think it was Terry Thomas played a broad Australian character in the show. And it was just straight Cockney, you know. And Australian actors were really pissed off that they would use somebody like that playing an Australian. So, and Sylvia said, no, but you see, it doesn't matter whether English people played Australians or not. It still sounds too much like the Cockney accent. And I was being pushed out the door, and I thought, wait a minute. So I thought, I'm sorry, Sylvia, that's bullshit. And she said, I beg your pardon. And I said, Australian actors, An Australian accent's nothing like a Cockney accent. A Cockney accent is the little guy with the cloth cap who touches the forelock to the governor. He kowtows to everybody, and he opens the door for the governor. He knows his place. An Australian doesn't kowtow to any man, and he calls a spade a spade. And he goes, right on, that's the guy. See, that's Alan. That's that. Oh, Alan, we call him Alan Carter, not Alphonse Gattani. And Sylvia's saying, no, I'll get out of here. This isn't going to work, you know. So I left with them arguing. And later that day, my agent rang me and she said, well, I don't know what you've done, but you got the part and you're playing an Australian pilot. So that's how Alan Carter was born.
So awesome.
Yeah. And so then all the writers, again, like they did with Crossroads, had to come to me and say, well, we're going to change everything. Nick, could you tell us about your history? So they sat with me for a couple of days. I went back to Johnny Byrne's house. I spent the weekend with him and I talked about my life and what I'd done and the surfing and the ski, doing all the Ironman stuff that I used to do in the lifeguards. And they wanted to write all that stuff in. And then they said, what about Air Force training? I said, no, I did a stint in the Army. In fact, I became a Green Beret with the commandos. But that's not what they wanted. They needed a pilot. So I said, well, we can make some kind of parallel there. And I knew a little bit about the Australian Air Force. So we talked about that. And they said, we'll make him an Air Force pilot who goes on to be chosen as an astronaut and then becomes seconded to work for Space 1999. And that's basically the history of how Alan Carter started and how the writers decided to write for me and let me kind of like guide them about Alan Carter's attitude to authority and to women and to friendship and loyalty and camaraderie. It was a great role. I was very, very lucky to be given it. Very lucky.
I mean, Alan Carter, I mean, he had all the right attributes. I mean, he was a strong-willed person, but he was also very loyal. He was sympathetic, and he was somebody that you could really count on. And it was just a wonderful character. I mean, he was a hero. I mean, a lot of people, Nick, are typing in, and they're really loving the stories that that you're revisiting with us as far as how this role. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of comments coming in, and I'm not interjecting because I want to have you be able to express everything, but everybody is just very, very happy to hear these stories, and there's a lot of people that are saying that as far as with Alan Carter, a character was a hero to them growing up. Some people have one woman, Linda, said that that you were her first crush. I mean, there's just a lot of different comments that are coming through.
What's her
also
address?
David Hirsch, who was a columnist at Starlog, and he was at the last two conventions, and he did Jerry Anderson Space Reports. He actually he said hi. He also said that Reg Hill was the person you were thinking of from Group 3 Productions. He actually interjected about that.
Reg Hill, he's dead right. Yeah,
yep.
Great.
Yeah.
I said it was Ray.
Thanks, David. Just wanted to put that out there. In fact, David will be on with next week.
I've had a lot of people when I go to conventions, people that became policemen, people that became youth counselors, people that became school teachers that were kind of doing physical education and stuff. They said that Alan Carter inspired them. We've always had characters in our life that have come through their own adversities. And I'm not Alan Carter, I'm an actor. And I just enjoyed the gift of being given a role that was so much fun to play. And occasionally it happens in life. When I did that play, Don's Party, that I went to England to do, again, that was written by an Australian author called David Williamson, and he's Australia's top playwright. He's written over 40 plays. And Don's Party was one of the most successful of them all. They made a movie of it later, but I couldn't do it because I was shooting Space 1999. And they shot it whilst I was doing Space 1999. They did ask me to go back at one point and do it. And we started negotiating for it. But I couldn't get out of my contract in time, and a wonderful actor by the name of John Hargreaves played the role of Don, and it was very successful for him because he went on to have a huge film career. So there's sometimes in life, you know, you just can't have everything. You can't do all the things that you would like to do and would happily do if they were possible at the time. But I've turned down a few things. I think I told you that I turned down Lost. I don't know whether we want to just briefly get into that or whether we want to continue talking about Space 1999. But my daughter was finishing her 12th grade, and we'd gone back to Australia. And I had the tendency to fly back to America a couple of times a year, even while we were living in Australia. I went back to Australia just before 9/11, and we remained there. And my wife said, we're not ever going back to America. But I didn't sell this house. I kept it, and thank God I did, because it's a wonderful home. And but we've got a lovely home in Australia too, thank God. So I went home for that, and my daughter went through high school in Australia, became a fashion designer, went to college doing fashion, and during the time she was doing her finals, she said, Daddy, will you promise me one thing, that you don't go back to America this year? This is my 12th grade. I'm going from 11th into 12th grade. I've got to get good grades, and I just love you being here for me, you know, will you please? So I said, yeah, I promised that I would. Now, our son at the same time was doing his final year at NYU, graduating with classical honors out of drama department. He was snapped up by the Aquila Theatre Company as a result of that. And so just before his final day, all the parents fly to New York and they watch their sons and daughters doing their final performance. And it was Henry the Fourth, Henry the Fifth, Henry the Fourth, I think. It's parts 1, 2, and 3. It's 3 plays. And it took 9 hours to do because you'd watch the first play and then we'd have a lunch break. And then you watch the second play, then we'd have a dinner break, and then you watch the third play. So it was a 9-hour performance that we went through as an audience. And it was done in a gymnasium. And we all sat around the walls of the gymnasium 2 deep, and they covered the floor in exercise mats. And the actors would be off behind us, and they'd run and jump over the top of us and do a roll onto the mat. It was a wonderfully exciting experience. They didn't use swords; they used long kind of pieces of rolled up cardboard and canvas, and they'd hit each other with those as the swords. And it was a very, very physical performance, and they all wore gymnastic karate clothes doing this Shakespeare in very classical accents. My son is very physical and was wonderful in it, and we enjoyed it immensely. And whilst I was there, I rang my American agent and said, guess where I am? And he said, I don't know. He said, Nick, I just had April Webster on the phone, who works for J.J. Abrams. They're shooting a new show called, I think it's called Lost or something, and they want you. And I said, no, I can't. I'm in New York. I've come to watch my son. Well, when are you coming back to LA? I said, I'm not. Well, I'm stopping in LA for a day, but I'm flying on to Sydney on Friday. We arrive in LA on Thursday. He said, well, the auditions are on Thursday. Can you get here for those? And I said, no, look, there's no point in me doing that. I don't know what this show is, but I don't want to do it. And he said, well, April really has actually your request. And he said, Nick, it's very rare that, you know, they actually say, we want Nick Tate especially for this role. So you should come and do it, the audition. I didn't want to do it. And they wanted me there at 10 o'clock in the morning. There was no way I could get there at 10 o'clock in the morning. And he said to me, catch the red eye Wednesday night. And I said, I'm not, look, I've just watched my son in this show. I'm not catching any red eye. And he said, Nick, you really should do this. This could make you. So I don't know. I was very conflicted. I caught the red eye and I flew back to LA, and I got to the studio where they were doing the auditions. And there were all these Australian actors there up for this role. And they were all young and good looking guys. And I'm not young or good looking anymore. And I thought, this is not going to work. I don't know what I'm doing here. And April Webster and the producers didn't arrive. 10 o'clock happened, 10:30 happened, 11 o'clock happened. More and more actors were coming for the audition, and they still weren't there. And then word was they were sorry, they were stuck in traffic. So they eventually arrived, and they all came in and went, and April went, oh, Nick, you came, wonderful. And then she went inside with the guys. And then they called for the first guy to go in. Great, big, beautiful, good-looking fellow went inside the room. April greeted him at the door. Oh, Tony, darling, gave him a big kiss, took him inside. And I could hear all this laughter going on. He was in there for 15 minutes. I'm thinking, God, he's obviously got the role, you know, and he came out, kissed her goodbye again. Oh, and Jack, would you come in next? And I'm thinking, I should be here. I was here first. But anyway, she didn't bring me in. He goes in, he's in there for 20 minutes. And I'm thinking, what is going on, you know? And I can hear all this laughter and Bon-Ami and June. And then she opens the door and she looks out and I go like this. And she goes, oh, yes, come in, Nick. And as she's calling me to come in, her cell phone goes off in her hand. And she goes, oh, all right, darling. Everybody, this is Nick Tate. I've got to go take this call. And I walk into the room and she goes outside to answer her cell phone. You've no idea the humility, I mean, the difficulties sometimes actors have to go through. I'm standing in this room. There's about 9 people I've never met in my life. I know that J.J. Abrams is one of them. And I know that the producer who worked with him on the show, Damon Pereira, something like that. He was the producer of Lost. J.J. Abrams was the #1 producer, but this guy actually did all the work. And seemed to me there were a lot of very young people in the room. There were little young girls in there as well. I want to say young girls, like 20-year-old secretaries and stuff. I've later learned that producers will tend to do that. They take in some of the office girls. They come, we're going to do a casting. And then when the actor goes out, they say, what everybody think? And, you know, all the producers that know the scripts and know the characters are going, yes or no. And then they ask the girls who know nothing, oh, I thought he was wonderful. Or no, I didn't like him. And they want to know what people think, you know, so that's the thinking behind that. So I go in and I'm standing there and thinking the first guy did 15, the next guy did 20. And this young guy with a pink cap says, you ready? And I go, yeah. Well, go. And I said, go? He says, yeah, do the part. I'm thinking, where's all the chat and all the laughter and stuff that was going on with everybody else? So I thought, all right, bugger it. So I just did the scene, boom, straight through. And he goes, and nobody says a thing. And he says, get out of here. I said, I could do it again. He said, what for? I said, well, you might want it in Swahili or something. And he said, no need. Get out of here. So I walk out and I'm bamboozled and I'm pissed. I'm angry. And April's over there in the corner talking on the phone. And I'm walking out. She goes, oh, Nick, you all right? Goodbye, darling. Yeah. I'm thinking, oh, bugger that. I was so angry. I walked outside and there was a big palm tree out there. I punched the palm tree, nearly broke my hand. I was pissed off. I come all the way back from New York. I'm flying to Australia tomorrow. And here I've been asked especially to come and do this. And I'm in the room for 2 minutes and gone. Get out of here, he says to me. So I go and I call up a mate of mine, Nick. And I said, I'm in LA. He said, oh, what are you doing? And I said, can we go and have a cup of coffee somewhere? Because I don't drink. So we go to Priscilla's down in Burbank. And we're sitting there having a cup of coffee and he's commiserating with me and we're swapping, you know, horror stories about, you know, how and why we're doing what we're doing. And I said, and I don't even know why I came to the audition because I got to go back to Australia and flying tomorrow. Oh, yeah, all right. And then my phone rings and it's my agent. He says, so you're flying to Hawaii tomorrow? And I said, no, man, I'm going to Australia tomorrow. He said, no, you're not. You're going to Hawaii. And it was one of those, what are you talking about? He said, Nick, you nailed it. I said, they hated me. They told me to get out of the room. And he said, yeah, that's because you nailed it. And, you know, I've come to understand now in life that the people that they make the fuss over and do all the laughter and clapping on the back, they're being nice to them because they're never going to get the part. And they like the guy, but he didn't do it. And then when some guy comes in and he actually said, you knocked it out of the park is what they said. That's why they told you to get out of here. I said I could do it again. What for? Get out of here. You know, in other words, he was saying, you've knocked it out of the park. Get out of here, you know, because that's what he said to me. I didn't understand it.
Don't waste my time because you were great and we want you for the part.
Yeah, you know,
Nick, I actually have some. I have some questions that came in from
kind
different.
of frozen there for a second.
Oh, can you hear me? There we go.
I can now, but I'm wondering, are you getting all my stuff? Am I freezing?
No, everything is fine. You're
Okay,
coming through perfect. Just want to let you know that yeah, everyone is loving your you know, these stories that you're telling, and you know, just going on, you know, talking about Lost and Space 1999, and a lot of people are commenting that, you know, they didn't even know some of the things that had happened, because I know you said, you know, about talking at previous conventions and everything. So a couple of the questions that have come through, and I'm just going to read a few of them to you. First off, Isabel wanted to know, what was your favorite film that you did?
Oh, well, it's kind of like love, you know, you fall in love several times in your life, and who was your favorite girlfriend or boyfriend, or who was your favorite dance partner? I've had so many great parts. I've had so much success, or at least stuff that gave me great love and joy. It's and it isn't always a film or even a television series. More often than not, it could be a moment in the theater. The first musical that I ever did was Canterbury Tales. It was one of the most successful, funniest, and uplifting shows I've ever been in. And at the end of every performance, we used to get, what in the traditional sense, 10 to 12 curtain calls every night, with people standing and cheering ovations. That is the most thrilling thing that an actor can ever have. It is so rewarding to have that one-on-one, or one-on with 1,000 audience, you know. Never forget Canterbury Tales. I adored it. Dynasty was a series that I enjoyed very much, playing with my dad. But I don't think there were any particular special moments in that. Fred Skepsey asked me between the episodes of, now obviously some episodes of Space 1999, but you do it fragmented. You've got one scene which might last 2 minutes or 3 minutes, and you work on it for half the day, and then you shoot it, and then you shoot it from the other angle and this angle, and it's all done. And later on, it's all with editors, and moments that you loved doing are gone because the editor decided they wanted to be on, more often than not, on Martin's reaction than on me saying the line, because that's what happens to star actors. They get all the you know, the reactions and stuff. But overall, for the years on Space 1999, it was a great thrill for me to be on that series. It had its great disappointments, with people like Fred Freiberger coming in and trying to destroy everything that we'd done and worked for. I actually walked away from the show one time. That's another story that we could talk about. But my favorite things, okay, Fred Skepsey asked me in the middle of, when I'd finished the first series of Space 1999 and had missed going to do Don's Party because I was working on Space 1999, Fred Skepsey asked me to fly to Australia and do a film called The Devil's Playground. Now, there's also a porno film called The Devil's Playground, so be very careful if you're looking for it. It was shot in Australia in 1975, and I play a Catholic teaching brother, and it's all about a seminary for young men to become priests, and it's all about the sexual torment and the religious fervor and the torment of being in any strict religious, let alone the Catholic faith, which I don't admire. In fact, it put me off religion altogether, really. I do believe in God. I do believe in what I consider to be a greater power. But I like what the Baha'is say, and if I have a religion, it is the Baha'i religion. If you don't know what that is, it's BAHA'. It believes in the universality of mankind, that all peoples, all colors, men and women are equal. A man and a woman are like the two wings of a bird. A bird cannot fly straight unless the wings have equal strength and equal time. It's so important. He was a wonderful man. And most Baha'is that I meet are wonderful people. They're non-political. Anyway, roles again. So The Devil's Playground is a wonderful film. In fact, I won the AFI award for it, which is an Australian award, together with the young boy that played Thomas, who's the lead of the film. And we shared that award together. And I think rightly so, because it was a great honor and a wonderful film to do. I shot another film that I loved called Summerfield, which has not ever been seen in America. Well, that's not true. It has in what they call film festivals. It was shown in film festivals and people loved it, but it's never had a cinematic release here. It's a very beautiful film, and it can be, I think it's the company that put it out on a DVD is called Umbrella Films. And it was shown in England, again, never in a cinema. The BBC Two in England used to do Christmas movies on Christmas Day, and they would do a festival of Australian films, and they always played about 5 of the top Australian films of that era: Picnic at Hanging Rock, My Brilliant Career, Summerfield, and maybe The Devil's Playground as well. And the interesting thing is there was a very important film critic in England called Alexander Walker, and people would always look at his recommendations. And he looked at films like My Brilliant Career and Picnic at Hanging Rock and The Devil's Playground and Summerfield, and he stated, because he was the person that chose these Christmas movies for BBC Two, he said that Summerfield is the most underrated Australian film of the decade, and for my money is the best Australian film of the decade, including Picnic at Hanging Rock and My Brilliant Career. So it's worth looking for Summerfield if you can find it. I don't know.
I've actually seen that, Nick, too. I've seen it on YouTube, believe it or not. You can actually catch it on.
Can you? Really?
So
okay. It's a story about a school teacher who goes to a little country town. In fact, it's a tiny island, and all the children are different ages. They go to the one class, and he teaches them all because it's small town, backward village. And the school teacher that was working there mysteriously disappears, and he's a replacement teacher. And he feels that the man has disappeared because he was murdered. And so it's a thriller, and it's a very clever little film. And I'm proud of that. And people say, which have I loved? It's not the greatest film I've ever done, but I'm very proud of it. And I agree with Alexander Walker that Summerfield was a highly underrated film, and it was one of the best films to come out of the 70s in Australia. Okay, that's
Nick. I have another. I do have another question too that's come up, and a lot of people are asking about your role on Star Trek: The Next Generation, but more so Star Trek: Deep Space Nine, and when you worked with Colm Meaney, about, how that and your enjoyment with that.
I enjoyed it immensely. I told you briefly today, I was asked to do Next Generation with Patrick Stewart, and the last episode that Will Wheaton was on, in fact, it was called The Final Mission. And I played Durgo, I think his character's name was, and he used to drink the rocket fuel, so he was drunk all the time. It was a wonderful role to play. I enjoyed it immensely. And Jonathan Frankel, is that his name, who was one of the leads of Star Trek Next Generation?
Jonathan Frakes?
Frakes, yes. He became one of the directors later on of Deep Space Nine. And he asked me to come in and read on it. There was a third show that I nearly did. I used to wear glasses. I don't know if people know that, but I did. and I got contact lenses for the first time in my life. And I knew that when I was going in for the role of the Star Trek episode, that being set that far into the future, people would not be wearing glasses. So I thought I better not wear my glasses to the audition. So I'd just been given contact lenses and I didn't know how to put them in. And I hated putting them in. Had some terrible problems with them. So I sat in the car outside before I went in to the studio to do the show. And I tried to put my contact lenses in. And I put the left eye in the right eye, and I put the right eye in the left eye, and there were different strengths. And I was totally friggin' screwed. And my time I was late. So I ran up the stairs, stumbling, and my eyes watering and streaming. And I get in, and they say, "Are you ready?" And I went, yeah. And I go in, and Jonathan goes, "Everybody, this is Nick Tate. It was so wonderful in Next Generation with Patrick, and 3 years ago. And now are you ready to do this, Nick?" And I said, I was doing voiceovers then, so I had no time to even learn this thing. So I thought, well, I'll read it. And that's why I wanted to put the contact lenses in so that I could read it. And I can fake it when I'm reading. I hardly look down at all because as long as it's there, I can use it as, but I looked down and I couldn't see anything. It was just a blur. And my eyes were streaming. "You see to right?" I said, yeah. I said, "I got a bit of hay fever." I didn't say I'm wearing contact lenses. So they said, "Oh, that's okay, just relax. You know, you're a great actor. You can do it. Off you go." So I look down again and I'm stumbling on the lines. I can't see them. And he says, "Nick, is there a problem?" And I said, "Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I can't see without my glasses." He said, "Well," and they could see, I had them stuck in my pocket here and he could see them. And he said, "Well, why don't you put your glasses on?" And I went, "Well, because I've put contact lenses in and they're in around the wrong," and they're going, "Oh yeah, really? Okay, fine. So do you want to do it or don't you?" And I went, "Yeah, all right." And I pull out the glasses, I put them on, and it was like looking through Coca-Cola bottles, you know, it was impossible. So I said, "Sorry guys, you know, I can't do this." And I left. And I think he said to the main producers, "What a shame, you know, poor old Nick Tate, he's lost it. He can't remember anything. You know, he didn't know that I had all this problem with my eyes." So I didn't get asked to do another Star Trek for years. And then Deep Space Nine comes up. Now, I'd just been to Toronto shooting a series called FX. Remember FX? About the sound effects guy?
About that too.
The movie was called, that Brian Brown played. They had an Australian actor playing the role for the series. And in the first series, he was very popular. And they decided they wanted to write a role for his father. And they wanted to bring in a character who, because he was such an intelligent and smart guy and very sophisticated and good looking. And his father was going to be this awful kind of like degenerate rogue who was 65 going on 14 years of age, you know, like the bad boy at school. I love playing roles like that. I had another series in Australia that I went back and did called East of Everything, which I'd like to tell you about, again, where I played a degenerate father. I like playing these kind of crazy comedic characters. So
They always say the crazier the role, the meatier is, and the more fun it is, right, Nick?
Yeah.
I mean,
I'm in that stage of my life. I love doing comedy. So nobody's going to take me seriously anymore. So what the hell, go for the comedy. So I shot this episode in Toronto, which I enjoyed. It was nice being in Toronto. And my fellow actor, Danny, what's his name? He took me to, on the tip of my tongue, a day. He took me to play golf, and he was a great golfer, and I love my golf too. So I thought, well, this would be okay, you know. I'll have a nice 2 weeks here with him. And again, I finished the episode, and the director comes to me and says, "We loved what you did. This is a great idea for the father. We want to bring you into the series next year, second series. Are you available?" Well, just like, you know, I mean, I never finished that Lost story to tell you. They offered me Lost, and I couldn't. I said, I can't. I've got trouble with the son. My daughter's in her 12th year. I don't want to stay here doing this. It was a great episode of Lost. I ruined that whole story. I got the role. you know, you're going to Hawaii. So I go, and the director there, he says to me, Nick, we love what you're doing in this show. We'd love you to come on board. I said, what are you talking about? The planes crashed somewhere in the magic circle, golden triangle or whatever it's called. They're all with polar bears in the tropics, aren't they? He said, yeah. And I said, are my characters in Australia? Well, he wouldn't be on the island. He said, Nick, you don't understand. Anything can happen in this show. And we love what you're doing. So would you like to be in the show? I had been lying on a beach in Hawaii for 2 weeks. They worked me the first day and the last day. I was there for 14 days, and I worked the first day and the last day. And I got so sunburnt lying on Hawaiian beaches. And if I stay here, I'm going to die of skin cancer. And my daughter, I promised her I would go back to Australia. And she nearly slashed my throat when I told her that I was going to do the pilot or the first episode of Lost in Hawaii. Daddy, you promised you'd come back. I said, only the one. I'm only doing the one, darling. Don't worry about it. And I go, and then they offer me the series. I had no idea what Lost was. It was the weirdest show in the world, to be honest. If you ever watched that episode, it's episode 3. They shot the special first, 90 minutes long. They divided that into episodes 1 and 2. And then I was in the first of the continuing shows. And my character, as you know.
Remember you being on Lost?
Yeah, he stays in Australia, that character. Again, that was a fun character to play. And I loved working with Evangeline Lilly. I thought she was just a gift of an actress. There was a girl who'd never worked in film in her life. And she had dreamt about being an actress. And she went up for a commercial because she was bored, and she got the commercial. And the commercial director rang her up and said, you were so good in that. I've put you forward for a new television series. She said, I can't do that. I've just got married to my husband. What do you know? I'm living here. And he said, well, I've sent it down to LA and they're very interested. They want you to fly down and meet them. She said, well, I can't. And then they called her again and said, and so they thought she was playing hard to get. And so she flew down and met with them, and her husband saying, you're not doing this. She went down and did the audition. They said, right, you got the part. And she went to Hawaii with her husband being very upset about it. And when I went to shoot my episode, he was there. And he, like I, had to spend days and days and days not being on the set with the rest of the cast. Well, you know, going out and playing golf or swimming yourself, but not working because I had so much time off. And I've had 5 melanomas, ladies and gentlemen, 5 melanomas. 2 of them on my cheek here. I've got big scars there, but it makes me interesting, doesn't it? I've had them on my shoulder, on my arm, and on my foot. I'm so lucky. I've had many squamous cells and
No, you've been really
cells.
lucky, Nick, from everything that you said about that.
Yeah,
Really
but you know,
lucky.
you've got to stay healthy. When I play golf, I look like a Bedouin. I've got the hat down to here. I've got the mask on, and I want more, and I love it. But so so the episode of FX, I said, no, I'm not coming back to Toronto. I'm sorry, I'm not going to do that. I live in LA with my wife and kids, and I've been down that road before where I nearly went off and did Lost. I did think about it a lot, but in the end I said no. I had no idea it was going to be the most successful television series in history, but I'm glad I didn't know, really, because I probably would have done it and I'd be dead by now. So
Yeah.
I get back to
Everything happens works out.
So I'm
Works out the way
going
it
in
needs to.
What? I'm sorry, what are you saying?
I was just saying everything works out the way it's almost like ordained to work out. And it's amazing how timing takes a, timeline and, just different people that, are around, and just how everything comes about is just, it has everything come together.
Well, I want to finish because I know I digress terribly, ladies and gentlemen. I'm really sorry. But you did ask me, how did I get the 2 episodes? I did Next Generation with Patrick Stewart. That was just normal casting, went in and got that one. And I don't know how or why, but I did. Missed the next one with Jonathan Frakes, was that his name? Thinking that I'd lost it and that I couldn't remember my lines. But in actual fact, I was blinded by contact lenses in the wrong eyes and all the rest of it. A year later, the director that I'd been to Toronto with doing the one episode of FX that I did do and then refused the series. He said to me, I'm coming down to LA to work as a director, and I want to work with you again because I really like you. And he said, so I'll be looking for a role for you. Now I'm thinking to myself, oh yeah, they all say that. Anyway, sure enough, I get a call from my agent saying, there's a series called Deep Space Nine, and they want you to go in on it. So I go in, but the director wants to talk with you first. Oh yeah. So I get out to the studio, and there's a message waiting for me to talk with him. And they call him, and he comes out before the audition. He says, Nick, I got a bit of a problem here. He said, the producer wants to use an actor in this role who's his next door neighbor, and he owes him some favor. He's always promised him shows, never given them to him. This role, he says, is perfect for him. I think it's perfect for you. So I want you to come in, and I want you to knock this out of the park. And he said, because I know you can do it. And he said, but don't worry about the producer because he might give you a bit of trouble. So I'm thinking, why would a producer give me? Because he wanted this other actor to play the role. And he was even angry that they were auditioning other people. But this director liked me, loved me, and thought when he read this script that I was perfect for this character. You know, it was loosely based on Donnie Brasco, the movie, about the part that Robert De Niro played with Johnny Depp. You know Donnie Brasco? You're
Yes, I
looking
do.
blankly at me. It's about a cop who goes undercover. Well, this is the same story about Cole Meany going undercover and working with this criminal agency on this satellite island, planet. And I played the Robert De Niro character, who's the boss, who likes this character and doesn't know that he's a criminal plant on me, you know, a spy. And then when he discovers he is, normally you would kill a spy, but he likes him and he doesn't want to kill him. So it was a great role. I loved it. And anyway, I did what I consider to be a great audition, and the director standing behind me is giving thumbs up like that. And the producer says to me, Nick, you're not American, are you? And I said, no. And he said, well, you know, this character's American. And the director's going, it's okay. It doesn't matter. You know, we're international on space. No, this is an American series. You're not right about that. So he was giving me shit, you know. And I realized I should have, you know, I can do American accents. Obviously, I've been here for years. So, but I just didn't bother. I figured it was international thing, you know. And so many good English actors. Now, nobody ever worries about Patrick Stewart's non-American accent, right? So, because we're talking about the future. And Patrick Stewart's a wonderful actor. So I don't get the part. I'm told, sorry, it's not yours, you know, and I leave. And the director was really upset about it. He rang me and said, I'm just not going to win on, but don't worry, I'll find something else for you. He says, shame, because this is a great part. So about a week goes by and I get a call. Suddenly I'm off doing voiceovers. I get a call, Nick, where are you? What do you mean, where am I? This is my theatrical agent. You've got to go to Paramount Studios immediately. What for? Apparently they want you for that Star Trek episode. I said, but did the other actor got the role? The guy that was next, he said, yeah, Nick, he dropped dead. I said, what? He said, the man's dropped dead. He went to wardrobe, did all the stuff. He said he wasn't feeling well. He had makeup on and everything. He said he wanted to go home. He drove his car to the main gates of Paramount Studios and stopped in the gates. And the gate man came out and said, could you move your car? He was sitting in the car dead. Now, it's a horrible story, very, very sad, because he was a good actor and he would have been great in the part. But unbeknownst to me, and because he dropped dead on the Friday. This is a Tuesday. So all day Monday, they auditioned another 25 people for the role. And the director kept on saying to the producer, why are you auditioning all these people? I tell you, Nick Tate's the guy for the role. No, he's Australian. He's not going to be right for this. He said, well, in the end, he says to the director, well, why don't we call it Sydney Town? And so that's what they did. They made my character Australian. I didn't want to do it like that, but then now he wanted me deliberately to speak with an Australian accent. I'm thinking, maybe there won't be an Australian accent in 200 years from now. So this is crazy, but look, I just played the character. I love the character. He was devious. He was empathetic. He was vulnerable. And when he found out that this character that Colmini played was actually a spy, he should have hated him, but he didn't, because he liked the character. And so it was a very rounded character. I enjoyed it immensely. Yeah, I've had some very strange things in my life.
I was telling you, Nick, that Sherry and I were watching it, and it was definitely a favorite, one of our favorites that we enjoyed, just because your performance in it was so strong, and you really didn't, it was just he was a killer of a character. I mean, he was bad, but he was good. You really sympathized with him, and you really felt bad when you knew what was going to happen to him. I just want to let you know. I just want to give you a quick.
Sorry, buddy.
Todd just said that just wanted to say hello to you out there, just so you know.
Is Todd watching? God bless you, Todd.
Todd's watching. He joined in a few minutes ago, and he just said hi. So I just wanted to let you know he said hello. There's a few other people that have joined in.
I'm really sorry to do this. I need to go to the bathroom quickly.
Okay.
Can I do that?
Absolutely. I'll keep everyone entertained for a little bit.
Yeah, you keep everyone entertained. I'll just be a quick minute.
That's okay. Hey, everybody. Hope you're enjoying the stories with Nick. I'm seeing all of your comments coming through. I'd rather let Nick talk about the things that he's talking about. So I think it's fun to hear these stories, because these are stories that we just don't hear every day. So anyway, I did not want to be rude and interrupt him, because I see some of the comments that's coming through. So just put that out there. And I hope you are enjoying the special episode of Remembering Science Fiction Television Shows of the 1960s and 1970s, episode number 13, Space 1999, with my special guest star, Mr. Nick Tate. And he is also my co-host tonight. And also, just to let you know, I'm going to give some shout outs real quick. Coming up on Wednesday, our companion show is Sci-Fi Distilled. We'll be on Mike Rizzo and Mary Beth Rakowski. Do that. It's science fiction television shows of the 80s and the 90s and beyond. We try to give a shout out to each other when we're doing these shows. So just stay tuned and watch for that. They are going to have the Akutas on Wednesday night talking about Michael and Denise Akuta talking about Buckaroo Banzai. So tune into that. Next weekend, Friday, which is going to be the 22nd, stay tuned, because I'm going to actually be doing a special episode, which is going to be about Star Wars, since next weekend is the anniversary weekend of classic Star Wars, which is episode number 4, which is A New Hope, but actually it premiered on May 25th, 1977, and it's coming up on the 43rd anniversary. So my old grade school friend, Joseph Metz, is going to be on with me, and we're going to actually be talking about Star Wars and reflecting back about how it was growing up, remembering it, and then also talking about now. So that's going to be really interesting. Stand by for that. And then also next Monday, which is going to be on the 24th of May, I am going to have David Hirsch on, and we're going to be revisiting 99 again. David Hirsch, as you know, was with Starlog magazine, and he wrote Jerry Anderson's Space Report, and he will be my guest co-host on Sunday, May 24th. So I'm very excited about having David on, and we'll be kind of reflecting back about 1999 as well. So there's a lot of interesting stuff coming, down the pike, and just wanted to put that out there for everybody. Hi, Nick.
Hey, I'm back.
Yep.
Hey, you mentioned Todd.
I just wanted to let you know too, Nick, because I'm watching the time for you too, because I know we're actually overtime, but that's fine with me. But I know you had some things to do coming up shortly, so just so you know, I've got
a call coming from Australia. I'm doing a television cartoon series in Australia called The Strange Chores, and I play Von Hessling, who is a monster hunter. And strangely enough, you'd think Von Hessling would speak with a German accent or some kind of European accent. But the Australian producers want this character to be Australian. So again, I'm, saying, well, yeah, I can do Australian, no problem. But in the middle of Von Hessling, I'm in the middle of the series right now doing it. I do voiceovers on that. But Todd Morton, you know, has been a great mate of yours and mine. He's running his own fan clubs with the models, but he's helping to put together the
Space 1999 Chips and Props page.
Sorry?
Oh no, I'm sorry. He runs with Gordon Moriguchi. They do the Space 1999 Ships and Props page on Facebook, and it's done wonderfully with everything.
Yeah, and thousands of members. Todd is helping resurrect my Nick Tate fan club because my darling Eileen Skidmore and Phyllis Proctor, both of them who ran the Nick Tate fan club for the last 40 years, they died within almost a year apart of each other, sadly. Two beautiful people.
Tragic, very tragic.
Yeah, two wonderful people who a great deal of history has died with them because they knew more about my career than I do and than my wife does. And they looked after me and they loved me and I loved them. And I had the great fortune to see them on many occasions, but particularly the last time I went to England, we went to Peterborough, where we had the convention.
Yeah, that was
in
September of 2014.
And there's a big, was it 2014?
Yeah, it was September of 2014. Yeah, it's almost 6 years, Nick, which is crazy.
That
was actually my first time in the UK.
Well, there's a big cathedral there, Peterborough Cathedral. And my mother's brother, Arthur Carglin. Arthur Carglin was the bishop of Peterborough Cathedral. I did not know that, but Phyllis and Eileen were both wonderful historians, and they had walked through the cathedral and they saw his name, and they came to me and said, "Do you know Arthur Carglin?" And I said, "Yeah, he was my mother's brother, half brother." I think he was cardinal. They said, "Yeah, cardinal of Peterborough Cathedral," and there's a whole room dedicated to him. So they took me there, and I just saw another side to those girls, a loving, wonderful side. I've spent many, many wonderful hours with them, and very clever people, real historians, understanding about the history of England and the kings and queens, very knowledgeable. I was humbled by the fact that they would spend any time with a lowly actor, quite frankly, to tell you the truth. I know none of that kind of history. It's not been my forte in life. And it's wonderful how they have that kind of love of the ancient and also this love of the fanciful in sci-fi. But anyway, Todd Morton has taken over that
joining
position.
that club, Nick, in I was saying I remember joining that club with them in 1986. And Eileen, I used to correspond with her back and forth, just like many of us did on, from fans of the show. And she was always so gracious, her writings and everything. And, just staying connected with the fans. And then it was so nice to finally meet her almost after, 30 some years because, of corresponding on and off.
Yeah.
And then the convention, she, like you said, she passed away like 6 weeks later, and it was just so tragic. And she was just such a sweet person.
And what a surprise! I mean, if she'd been sick at the convention, you'd say, well, she didn't look well. She didn't look sick. Right. She was happy and just a change. I don't even know if it was it 6 weeks. It was not long thereafter. I was stunned.
Yeah, it was like 5 or 6 weeks. It wasn't a long period of time. And I remember when the news on Facebook, because all of the fans stay connected. It's like a family. And that's the one thing I want to say too, Nick, with Space 1999, it's amazing because, the show is, we were discussing earlier, it's 45 years old. The first convention was in 1978. And this is a question that came up, and I'm kind of like jumping around a little bit. Warren had asked, he said, do you have a favorite moment from a Space 1999 convention? And I know we have to watch the time and you have to get going too, but I just wanted to throw that out there. It's just something that,
Look, I know people always
Probably
want
all-
to say was that, you know, there was the funny sequence of when we were all, the foam came into Moonbase Alpha, and it was an hysterical episode because they found this foam machine that could foam up the whole set, but it had soap suds in it. So if you moved around in the soap suds, it was like being on slick ice, and people were falling over all over the place. And the camera couldn't see you because once you went into the soap suds, you were vanished. And Charlie Crichton, who was about 75 years of age, and Charlie had this strange thing with his jaw. He was talking, saying, what I want you to do is I want everybody to run into the fog. He called it fog, but it was soap bubbles. And then I'll count to 5 and then come running out again. People ran into the fog and hit the soap bubbles and hit them and just slid, you know, on the floor because it was slick studio floor. And we didn't know where we were. By the time you got up, you didn't know which was left from right or where we were. And Charlie jumped up and chased after us, calling, "Cut, cut!" And he went into the soap bubbles as well. Very funny stuff. But usually they weren't particularly.
Love that story.
comedic.
Stop the phone.
Yeah, stop, cut, and he vanished. Yeah, he was a character, that guy. Also, the time that my Tim Cauldron, my stunt double, I had a stunt double. I didn't want a stunt double. I said I'll do all my own stunts. But Tim was a jouster, and he worked for a company that showed knights jousting with white horses and big swords and stuff. And he was an expert horseman, and he also did lots of high wire falls and stuff. He looked a bit like me, so they wanted to use him because of his profile, but I wanted to do all my stunts. So the stunt coordinator came to me. He said, "Nick, you realize if he doesn't do the stunts, you're doing a stunt man out of a job." So I went, "Oh, sure, I don't want to do that, man." He said, "Well, you know, keep him on. I mean, let him rehearse with you." And I said, "Okay, he can rehearse with me. He can help stunt coordinate the stunts, and but I want to do the actual stunt because they gave me a guy one time that was round and just clearly wasn't me." I said, "That's not going to happen anymore." I went to Sylvia and Jerry. I said, "It's too important to me that, you know, I do what I do, you know." And so anyway, we got to this episode where Maya's character in the second series had metamorphed into some kind of big monster, and they managed to tie her down on a bed in the infirmary. And everybody was trying to get her to metamorph back to herself because she was still this monster. And Alan Carter comes in to talk with her. He comes striding in. As he leans over her, she grabs him and throws him across the room. So they put the camera down on the floor, and they put the gurney that she was lying on above. And Catherine Scholl is lying on that. And as I get to her bedside, she suddenly changes into this monster and grabs me and throws me over the bed. So the studio, the sets never had any ceilings. So if you put a camera down on the floor and look up, you could see all the lights, you could see all the studio rigging and everything. So that wasn't going to work. So they decided they were going to put a ceiling in, which we then had to wait about 3 hours till they put in this ceiling. And your studios can do that pretty quickly, and they did. And then they brought me in, and what I had to do was they were going to cut it. I'd come running in and jump off a mini trampoline as the stuntman lying there playing the Catherine as the monster sort of propelled me with his hands over, and I'd land right in front of the camera on the floor where they'd put a mattress for me to land on. And I said, "Guys, if I bounce off the trampoline, I'm going to hit the roof, and then I'll hit my head, and I'll land on the floor short." And Timmy said, "No, Nick, I've worked it all out. You can do it." I said, "No, Tim, it's too dangerous." And Charlie Crichton, again, was the director of that. "Oh, don't be ridiculous. God, you can do it. You do all the other stuff. You can do it, Nick. Come on, let's see you do it." I said, "No, Charlie, it's too dangerous because you've put this trampoline here and that roof is too low. We're going to hit it." Tim said, "Look, let's just film one and I'll do it for you, and then you can do it." So I said, well, I really wish you wouldn't, because I think it's going to end in disaster. So he said, no, we can do it. So he comes running in, bounces on the trampoline. The guy grabs him and pushes him, and he hits the roof, bang, like I said, and falls from the roof, which is 8 feet high, down onto the concrete floor, 2 feet short of the mattress. Snapped out his 2 front teeth and broke his collarbone. Now, this is a guy that has to joust every day, on the weekends.
Right.
And suddenly he's out of action. They didn't insure him properly. I felt terrible. I did give him a few bucks, I can tell you, because I felt so bad for him being out of work. But it was a choice that he made and I would not have made. I think I'm pretty sure they filmed it all. I did some trying to cover of it, so it's a bit of me and a bit of him, but damn, he snapped his teeth. Fortunately for me, at the time, I didn't know. His teeth were false anyway. They were, these 2 front teeth were caps, but it doesn't make it any easier.
Oh, so you probably
out, and he broke his collarbone, which meant he couldn't joust for about 6 weeks. So are you talking about funny moments in the show? Weird moments. I don't know about funny moments. I enjoyed when we got out into the forest and where we went back to Bannockburn. You might remember with the Scots, there was a war of Bannockburn going on.
Yes.
And
aware.
maybe I might have that mixed up with another episode where we met some cave people and I had to go down and fight this man in a cave.
The Cave People was in the first season, which was Full Circle, where they had Xenia. She was in the cave girl outfit and everything. And the Cave People, there was like a time warp. I mean, that was a first episode, and that was filmed at Black Park, right? I believe
it was just outside
Pinewood.
Pinewood Studios. The forest there's called the Black Forest, and it was just outside the fence that we worked on. That they dug a big pit that I had to get into and fight this guy who was a caveman, and I enjoyed all that stuff because you're outside doing stuff, not in the confines of the studio. You've probably seen all this. A lot of people write in and asking for my signature on fan letters, but all this stuff here, this is what Todd's got. We've got hundreds of these, and I know that most guys and gals, well, that was at a convention. They made that up for me.
It was a convention we just did, Nick. That was the Breakaway 2019 from last year.
Yeah. Well, Todd's got all of these, and I know that folks. Oh, this is. Do we know who that is?
That's from Lost.
That's Lost, Evangeline Lilly. And I love that girl. She was great to work with, and she. Here's an interesting thing. When I first did the show, I'm ushered onto the set, and the director says to me, the first assistant said, you go to makeup first. So I go into makeup, and I have not met Evangeline, and I'm sitting in the makeup chair, and in the mirror, there's a girl sitting in the makeup chair there. And she says, oh, you must be playing Ray. And I said, yeah. She said, I'm Evangeline. I'm playing, is it Kate, the character's name? Yeah, I think it was. And she said, you want to run the lines? And I'm sitting in a makeup chair with a girl doing this. And I go, yeah, if you want to. So we do the lines, and we did the end of the show first, the scene where she runs away and I catch her stealing the money from my cupboard. And then she explains to me that she needs to go. And I say to her, look, everything's okay. Don't worry about it. I'll drive you to the train station in the morning. So it was a very emotional scene. And as I said, I didn't know the girl, had never worked with her. And we were doing the scene, and I'm looking in the mirror with her, and she starts crying. And I'm really moved. Here's this actress doing this scene with me. And we did this great scene together because the first time it just worked so well. Afterwards, we both get finished the makeup, and we walk outside, and she says, was that all right? And I said, are you kidding me? And she said, no, why would I'm sorry. What do you mean? And I said, sweetheart, was it all right? No, it wasn't all right. It was fabulous. What more can I tell you? She said, oh, that's a relief. I said, I don't know. What do you mean it's a relief? She said, well, this is my first show. I said, no, come on. What are you talking about? You're a seasoned actress. She said, no, I'm not. This is my first show. Now, of course, she'd made the pilot, but I loved that girl. She was just such a natural and
Raw talent, right?
tremendous humility as well, because, you know, it was a difficult scene to do and she nailed it. And she never put a foot wrong in all the day that I worked with her and the following day later. Just her emotions were spot on. And it just goes to show you, you know, it's very difficult to teach somebody to be an actor. She never took an acting class in her life. She just did it. And I've never had an acting class in my life either, because my parents were actors and I've done a lot of acting, but I guess, and I think I was pretty terrible in the beginning, but you learn along the way, you know? And that's why I always think that people that are having, as I started off this conversation in the beginning, people that are having a problem at school, you don't have to worry about school, because once you get out there into the real world, you're doing like my daughter, what she did best. My daughter Jessie was not a natural scholar, and neither was I. I got -2 out of 100 for French. -2 out of 100. Can you believe that? My French teacher said, Nicolas, I think maybe next year you don't do French. I said, yeah, I think you're right. I was good at math. I've always been good at math. And woodwork. Oh, thank God for that. I built this house. I love building houses. So do what you love.
And your house is beautiful from everything I've seen. That's quite impressive. Wow.
Yeah. Well, you're only, this is my office. It's nothing. But yeah, I've got a big cathedral ceiling down in the front of the house. I tore down the house that was here, and there was a garage and a big drive came up the side of the house. I took out the drive, took out the double garage at the back, put in a swimming pool back there, and then at the end of the house, I built a big, it's 37 feet long and 25 feet wide, and the ceiling is 18 feet high with big beams across. I like barns. I went to the Will Rogers house here, and the Will Rogers house inspired me so much, I decided I'm going to build a house just like this. And well, it's not really like it. I don't have the animal heads on the wall. But also he had a lot of natural wood. My wife doesn't like natural wood. She likes it, but she wants to do things like pickle it with liming white. So although it's wood grain, it's pickled with liming white in that front room. We've changed so much in life. I remember once I used to paint everything yellow and orange when I first got to England. I had furniture that was white with orange panels on it and yellow trim around the edges. It was kind of, well, it was the 60s, you know, it was psychedelic and purples and oranges and yellows and everybody was smoking pot. Yeah, I was there with the Beatles. In 1965, I arrived in England. I spent 4 years paying my dues, being with my dad and meeting Leo McKern and Ray Barrett and all those people before I did Space 1999. Because that was 1965 when I first went to England. I was 23 years of age. And I went back to Australia for Canterbury Tales and then Dynasty and those other series I did. And then back to England when I got Space 1999. In 1973, you say it's 45 years old. It's not. It's more like 47 years old.
Yeah, that's
started in
73.
We started filming in 73. The first episode was shown in 1975 in America. So that's where you get your 45 years from.
Yeah, and believe it or not, I know better too on that, because from what I've gathered, from what I've read and everything, it started November of 73 and then it finished in March of 75.
Yeah.
And you know, so programmed with thinking that, you know, when it actually showed. So that's what was unique about the series too. I mean, about the series as well, that here the entire first season was filmed and then it was shown in the US for the very first time and all the episodes have been completed. Whereas, you know, when shows are on are being shown on our network, or if they're even being syndicated, they're being made as they're being shown. Here, the entire series was actually completed and done. So if there was any type of feedback that was coming, it didn't matter because the show was already done. And then I guess that's where
that was the problem, that Americans, particularly Abe Mandel, who was in charge of ITC in New York at the time, and for Lou Grade, was his feedback was that he didn't like a lot of what was going on. He wanted to change this and he wanted to change that. In fact, he wanted to change my character. He didn't like Alan Carter. He said he couldn't understand my accent. So when I came to New York, and I was invited to the Pittsburgh convention, which was a Star Trek convention, I was the first actor from another series to be invited to a Star Trek convention. He couldn't understand why those characters liked me so much. And so he asked to meet me, and I met Abe Mandel. I didn't know who he was. I'd finished the series, and here I was being met by this man who was marketing the show in America. And he said, I got to tell you, Nick, he said, sitting here talking with you, he said, I find you very personable, and I understand you perfectly. And I had a problem with your character in the beginning with that strange Australian accent. He said, why did they make you do that? I said, well, that's what Sylvia wanted. You know, she didn't want me to sound like a Cockney. She wanted me to push up the fact that I really was Australian. And although I don't really talk like that, that's what they wanted in the beginning. And he said, well, I want you to drop it. I want to sound, you sound just like you do now. Yeah, because I like this. He said, you know, my kids are the reason why you're in this show. And I said, really? And he said, yeah. When I told them that I didn't like your character, they said, oh, Dad, we love him. So he said, I said, okay, maybe if kids love you, then I'm going to keep you. You never know in life.
Yeah.
Who your allies are.
Well, that was the whole thing. And I remember when I remember, and a lot of people are writing in too, that they remember the heavy promotions on Channel 11. Because when I was growing up, and Channel 11 out in New York City, was WPIX 11, was the one that was really driving Space 1999. And like you said, Abe Mandel, I believe he was in the New York office. That's where a lot of all the information was coming from. But I remember we were coming back. My grandmother lived in Astoria, Queens, my grandmother and my grandfather. And Space 1999 was going to be premiering on Sunday night at 7 o'clock, kind of like how we're doing the show. And it was October 3rd of 76. And I remember I was like bugging my parents. I'm like, you know what, Space 1999 is going to be on, and it was like a 45-minute drive from Astoria, Queens to Bergen County. We lived in Wallington, and we got home like at 10 to 7. And I was such a Space 1999 fan. I had my tape recorder that I took, and then I actually plopped it in front of the TV, and I'm 10 years old, and I'm recording it so I could actually have that. That way I could listen to the episode. This is before, VCRs, DVD players, Blu-ray,
really?
Laserdisc players.
You just recorded the audio.
I taped the audio, and I had it right in front of the TV for the entire episode. And that's what I would do when the show was on. And there's a lot of people that I found out going to conventions later on that actually did the same thing, which was really cool. We had something in common, but that was how I could preserve the episode and listen to it. And wow. I remember being really excited that you were there. Xenia was there, but then there was, Prentice was gone, Barry was gone, and we had heard that, in the newspapers that Barry wasn't coming back. Catherine Shell was going to be on, which was great. She was in the first season. She was in that The Guardian of Paris. She was the servant. But anyway, Clifton was gone, and it's like, what happened to all these people? And nothing was explained. Then you had Tony Anhalt that was there, and he was just like, a major character that was in the show. But it was great that you were, an integral part of the story. And then I remember you saying that, that almost didn't happen with the second season. It's like, how could they actually even think that? It was crazy.
Well, perhaps I should just cover that briefly before we go, because I got to wrap this up. I got this Australian company calling me. I had gone back to Australia after this first series finished, and we were told that it would not be going on. And I shot The Devil's Playground in Australia. Then I did Summerfield the following year after Space 1999. So it was 2 years later. I did Devil's Playground, and then I was asked to fly back to England immediately because Jerry Anderson had decided to shoot a pilot for a new television series that the BBC was going to buy called Into Infinity, The Day After Tomorrow.
Yes.
And he wanted me to play the lead in that. And here's Jerry, who said to me when I first met him, I don't like actors, but Jerry did like me. And although he had a funny way of showing it. So I went back and I shot The Day After Tomorrow. And he thought that the BBC was going to pick it up, and they were negotiating to do it. But nothing came of it. And so I flew back to Australia. And I was back in Australia working when I got a call from somebody who said, are you going to be in Space 1999? And I said, no, it's finished, man. He said, no, they're reshooting it. I said, what are you talking about? He said, yeah, they're gearing up to reshoot it at Pinewood Studios. I hadn't had a call. So I rang Marina, my agent, and I said, I understand Space 1990. She said, yes, darling, they're not having any of the original cast. I said, well, that's insanity. How could they possibly do it? She said, I don't know. I mean, I've asked if they're interested, and they said, no, they don't want any. Barry Morse is gone. Xenia's gone. You're gone. Prentice is gone. Everybody's gone. So I jumped on an airplane and I flew back to England. And I said, I want to see Jerry. He wouldn't see me. He said, no, he couldn't see me. The show was cast. And I was really pissed. And I said, this is impossible. I'm the only one that was invited to other conventions. At that point in time, I was the only actor out of Space 1999 that had been to any science fiction conventions because I knew how popular Alan Carter was. I was getting thousands of fan mail all the time. So how could they go ahead and do this without that character being brought back into the series? How are they going to explain it? Then I got a sudden call from Jerry Anderson saying, would I come down and see him? I said to my agent, what's it about? She said, I don't know, but he wants to see you urgently. So I said, well, when does the show start? She said, I think it starts next week. And she said, I've got somebody playing another role in it, and he's booked to start next week. So I drove down to Pinewood Studios, and I'm ushered into Jerry's office, and he says, stands up from his desk. He says, well, Nick, you've won. I said, what do you mean I've won? He said, we want you back in the show. I said, Jerry, you wouldn't talk with me when I tried to call you. He said, well, look, we've got a new producer on the show. Everything's changed. Sylvia's gone. Prentice is gone. Xenia's gone. Clift, everybody's gone. It's all different. It's a whole new series. I said, but how can you call it Space 1999? You got Martin Landau and Barbara Bain back. He said, yeah, it is the same. Look, you got to meet Freddie. He's decided that he wants you in the show after all. He said, I went to bat for you. I said that you're great. I'm thinking, I bet you did. But anyway, so I said, how many episodes have you? Are you starting next week? He said, yeah, we've got 11 scripts. We've finished 7 of them. And I said, excuse me, can we just stop there for a minute? He said, yeah, what? I said, you say you want me back in the show? He said, yes. I said, what would I be doing? He said, you'd be playing Alan Carter. I said, Jerry, you just told me you've got 7 scripts finished. Alan Carter's not in any of them. What are you going to do? Cross out pilot and write in Alan Carter? He said, no, you got to go meet Freddie. He'll explain what he's going to do for you. He said, I don't do any of that, Nick. You know that. It's up to him. So I'm thinking, I can't believe that, And then they talk about Catherine and this new guy, Tony. They've all got star billing in the show. And what am I going to be, chopped liver? So I said, I don't know that I'm very comfortable with this. So I meet Freddie Freiberger, and I didn't like him from the instant I met him. He was double talk personified. And he asked me to come and spend Saturday at his house, or Saturday afternoon, have tea with him, he said. He was put up in a house in Mayfair somewhere. And his wife and kids were there. And he said what Abe Mandel said to me. He said, I got a bit misled. He said, I considered that your character was very underwritten and very wooden. And he said, but my kids just love your character. So he said, that's the reason I've decided to bring you back in the show. And I wanted to say, you're talking bullshit, man. And I said, well, but doing what? And he said, playing Alan Carter. He said, incidentally, he said, I've been thinking about this. I'm going to promote you. I'm going to make you a lieutenant. I said, "You're going to make me a lieutenant?" He said, "Yeah, you know, I think it's important that your character is promoted." I said, "Fred, have you ever seen this show?" And he said, "Well, of course, I've seen all the episodes." I said, "You didn't notice that I was a captain? And now you want to demote me to lieutenant?" Well, no, is that right? No, but nobody ever calls you captain. I said, "Yes, they do, all the time." I think he watched about 3 episodes, and I don't think I was in any of them that he watched, you know. He was a total asshole. So he tried to tell me how he was going to write meaningfully for me, and that my character was wooden, and that wasn't my fault. It was just bad writing, and that all the other actors around me were wooden, and he didn't want any of them. And he wanted to give me humanity and make me somebody that had flesh and blood. And I wanted to say, you haven't watched anything I've done in the show, man, because that's what people tell me. They like the fact that I'm so humane in the show, you know? So It was a very awkward conversation for me. And he wanted me to sign the contract on the spot in his house. I said, "No, I won't do that. If you say you're going to write for me, I need to see the scripts." He said, "What, are you going to hold me over a barrel?" And I said, "Well, you can give me the first day." He said, "I can't just do 1 episode." He said, "You got to sign for 3 or more." I said, "Well, I'll sign for 3. And then after 3, if you're writing, like you say, you're going to write meaningfully for me, we'll talk about some more." So I signed for 3 episodes. This was my doing. And they were writing quite well. And then I met Johnny Bone, and Johnny took me away, and we talked more about it. And they wrote some better episodes. Then we got to episode 7. And in episode 7, I say 1 line. And I'm on a Moonbase out in the dust, driving in a moon buggy. And he looks out the window and he says, "Alan, can you see them from there?" And or something like that. And I say, "They're all operational, Commander," something like that. And so they just wanted my voice. And because he guaranteed that he was going to pay me for every episode. So therefore, if I'm going to pay you all this money, I need to have you, you know, doing meaningful roles. So I walked into his office and I dropped episode 7 down on his desk. I said, "Is this how you write meaningfully for me?" He said, "Oh, for God's sake, you can't be in every moment of the show." I said, "Every moment, this is 1 line. You can stick it up your ass." And I walked out. I walked out of his office. I went home to Hazel. And we weren't married yet. And I said, I picked up the Los Angeles Times, and sorry, not London Times. And there was a holiday in Marhofen in Austria, skiing holiday. I love skiing. I rang up. I could fly the next day. I flew. I knew the episode was going to take 2 weeks to shoot. And we went for 10 days to Marhofen. I didn't tell my agent. I didn't tell anybody. I just left. And apparently the phone went crazy. Marina was trying to tell people where I was, didn't know where I was. I was naughty of me, but I was so pissed with this man that had been and always was a snake in the grass. So when I came back, they begged me, please, to come back. And they had all these scripts that were written for me. And they paid me very nicely. Thank you very much. And I went back into the series. And Fred knew. I said, "Anytime you screw with me, Fred, I'm out of here. Know that." Because we don't like each other. You are, as they say, American, you speak with forked tongue, I said to him. That's a true story.
No, I totally believe it. And
His kids are alive today, and they're in the industry, and they probably hate me for saying those things about their father. But even Martin Landau realized in the end that Fred was no friend to Space 1999. He made a lot of bad moves on that show. Jerry Anderson wound up hating him. And there you go. You know, we had a great thing going in the first series. And if they'd played their cards right and done the research early on, they might have been a whole different story.
you know what? The fans still remember you to this day, Nick, and also the other actors from the series. And you know what? Thank you for those memories, and thank you for keeping Space 1999 alive with us tonight. It's really appreciated. Thank you so much.
It's My great pleasure, Roy. You're a nice fella, and all the people that I've ever met involved with fandom and Space 1999, lovely people. It is a great joy and a pleasure. And I will come and do some more conventions, but with the coronavirus, buddy, I'm not doing any of that. My wife is making these, and I wear this all the time when I'm outside. I hope you've all got your masks. We've got to observe it because Mr. Trump doesn't know what he's doing, right? But we know what we're doing. Stay safe.
Thank you, Nick.
Love you.
You stay safe too. Everybody out there, thank you for joining us tonight. Please, I mean, this is a way for us to all come together. This is a very special time, to do it, just kind of break away from reality. We'll be back next Friday, which will be on May 22nd at 7 p.m. Again, it'll be episode number 14 of Remembering Science Fiction Television Shows of the 1960s and 1970s. And I will be covering Star Wars with my friend, old mate, Joseph Mess. So thank you, Nick. I know you have to run and you have to make your call. So thank you so much and be safe. And I'll talk to you.
Oh my God, look at this. There he is, calling from Australia. How about that? Right on the spot. I'll say goodbye to you. God bless.
Okay. Good night, Nick.